Well, hello and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show, where I'm interviewing an author named Pam Gaslow, who wrote this book, Don't Bring Your Vibrator to Rehab, a somewhat comedic memoir. I actually found this book incredibly interesting. It is an emotionally frenzied memoir that reveals the terrifying and lonely world of addiction, which I know all too well. After almost a decade of sobriety, Pam Gaslow relapsed into a life of dependency on marijuana, which nearly destroyed her. She recounts a devastating downward spiral that shattered her at 45 years old. From bongs to pipes to flavored vape pens, she drifted and then dove into a 2-year-long stoned void, a protracted journey to nowhere, as she called it. Gaslow was the 24-hour defunct addict living without purpose and barely able to function. And while she was aware that pot wouldn't kill her, she couldn't feel more dead inside. So I'm going to leave you with that little synopsis of what the book is about. We talked about everything from why people think that weed is completely harmless when it almost destroyed her life, to what she's doing now. So I hope that you enjoy this interview with Pam Gaslow as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I am super excited to welcome Pamela Gaslow to the show. Hi, Pam.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Oh, hey, look what I have here. This book, that is your book, called Don't Bring Your Vibrator to Rehab, a somewhat comedic memoir. I think very comedic, you could say, but also very serious at the same time. So let's just start with how did you come up with the title for the book?
Okay, so when I was interviewing rehabs to see which one I wanted to go to, they all give you a list of things you can and cannot bring. And initially, one list said you cannot bring your teddy bear. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I'm, going to call it Don't Bring Your Teddy Bear to Rehab. But then when I kept looking, another one said no sexual objects. And I was like, okay, so I'm definitely going to go with Don't Bring Your Vibrator to Rehab. So that's how I came up with it.
I love it.
So no, I did not bring my vibrator to rehab because a few people have asked me that.
You're like, in case you were wondering, I did not. Okay, so do us a favor, just back us up. At the top of the show, I shared something about your background, but from you, what is the book about? Why did you write it?
The book, well, I give you a little background. I was sober, like in AA sober, since I'm 26 years old, and I had like two major relapses, and I had one when I was 38 and when I was 48. So this one was the second one, the story of how I relapsed again and really what happened from there, and kind of like mental, emotional, and spiritual, like downward spiral of what happens to a human that smokes weed 24/7 for 2 years. And then the process of me coming to the realization that I actually really need to go to treatment, and then researching the treatment centers, and then finally going to treatment and writing about my stay there. So that's the book in summary.
So what I found really fascinating and what made me really interested to want to interview you was there's always this information out there when we talk about recovery. People are always like, weed is not a gateway drug. Weed is fine. Weed doesn't hurt you. It's becoming legalized all over the place. And I myself don't agree. Not that I'm anti or for. It's just that I know do you know Dr. Daniel Amen, who's a brain scientist?
No.
Anyway, he's a psychiatrist and he does a bunch of studies on brains. And I've just been following his work on weed use and what it does to your brain, just like drinking, just like other things. But I was like, well, if it's doing this to your brain, it kind of can't be super harmless, especially people who smoke a lot. So for you, the description in the book is that it was like 2 years, you like fell into this hole of lethargy and then eventually became quite depressed and suicidal. And what actually spurred you to call the rehabs, to just get to that realization that you needed help?
A couple of things. I mean, I knew I needed help just because I had been sober most of my adult life. I mean, I had 8 years sober and then another 8 years sober, in between a relapse. So that's 16 years of sobriety. So it wasn't something like I was I knew I shouldn't be doing it. I knew eventually I would have to stop. I was just trying to like put it off as long as I could. And because it's really hard and nobody wants to go and do that. It's so much easier every single day to just reach for a joint than rather like go fix yourself and and face your emotions and face your fears. So what happened to me was two things. First, I went to an allergist because I couldn't stop sneezing. I thought I was allergic to weed actually. And he told me that my lungs were at 65% capacity. And the scariest part of that finding that out was my response to him because I was stoned. And I said, well, what are they supposed to be at? Like I was literally so stupid. And afterwards I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just asked somebody that question. So that was my first wake up call, but it wasn't enough. And then I said, well, okay, I'm going to just stop smoking out of a bong. You know, I'm going to switch it up here because I'm going to save my lungs. Right. And so that was the first wake up call. And then eventually I started smoking those weed pens, which I don't know what's in them. I don't know if anybody does. And I started throwing up and that really scared me. And then I was like, okay, like you are literally poisoning yourself. Like this has become toxic in every way now. And that's when I decided to go to treatment.
So what did you learn about marijuana toxicity?
I mean, I've heard about it and I've read about it a little bit, and it happens with some people. It doesn't happen with others. And I'm not a doctor. I don't really know what it is. It's called like hypermenesis or something. And yeah,
yep.
And yep. I didn't want to know anymore because I was like, this can't be good and I'm going to quit. So, you know, I didn't really research that, but I had a friend who was a doctor and I called her because I was really scared. And she's like, no, it's from the weed. And, you know, I was like, that's enough. I didn't need to know anymore. I didn't really like research it further.
Right. I think that there's, because of the vape pens and because of, at least in the New York, Massachusetts area, right, there's a lot of legalization that has happened. So people are just going to recreational stores and buying that. If someone is in their 40s, let's say, or 50s, the pot that you smoked in like 1985 is most definitely not the weed you are getting in a vape pen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In the way of concentration, where you can choose and just choose a concentrate. So I do understand. I never heard back in the day of people having this toxicity, but it seems like now I started reading about it before I had found out about your book. And I was like, wow, because I had a friend who smoked a ton of weed and was barfing and was like, I think it's my allergies. I was like, I think it's because you smoke pot all day long. I could be wrong. And it did end up being that as well. I just find it so fascinating. How was it for you, Pam? I wanted to know, writing a book like this that is so personal, that is so honest, actually so funny, but honest, like you were being vulnerable and really revealing the real deal of what you experienced. How was that experience for you?
It was easy at the time because I'm just a person who's very honest and I don't really embellish anything. I just think like real life is more interesting than, you know, I do have like a great imagination, but I really write from experience. And I think it was cathartic. And it was just, I knew I wanted to write about treatment before I went to treatment. And, you know, I didn't want to have to go to treatment, but I was like, okay, well, I have a story and I'm going to tell it. And I don't know, I've always just been open and honest about like my struggles and my issues. And I think, you know, I don't know, that's just who I am. I'm not someone who like sugarcoats and I'm not a phony person. And I just think it's important, especially with sobriety, to be honest, because that's how people get help and that's how people recover. And I get help from other people who are telling their story. So it wasn't hard for me to write it, but now it's actually a little hard for me to read it. Looking back a few years and in the sense where I was like, wow, like I was so low, and it makes me sad, but it also like keeps it real for me. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to go back there.
Yeah, I definitely identify with not wanting to read. You know, there's this, for me with writing, there's this thing like you do it, it's done, it's the truth, and then sort of on to the next. Going back, because I wrote my first book in this past year, I don't know. I feel like it makes me very stressed out to think about going back and reading. Like, because am I going to want to change something, or am I going to be like, wow, I can't believe I told that story?
I definitely, like, there was definitely a part or two where I was like, oh my God, I cringe that I put that in there. But yeah, too late now.
That's what I'm talking about. Forget it. So how long did the process of writing the book actually take you?
I would say, I wish I could. I don't even know exactly, but I know I started it and then I put it down for a long time because I am really good with starting things, and finishing them is a little bit of a struggle, like procrastinating, and also like, how do you end it and where do you end it? And, like, there's never really an ending, like life keeps going on. But I guess it probably took me like 6 months, something like that. I took all the notes when I was in treatment, but it was just like putting it all together and making it cohesive and, that kind of thing.
Right. But how, so much foresight you had to say, I'm going to keep track of what happens in rehab, because I'm going to, so did that give you a purpose sort of while you were in there besides getting clean?
Definitely. I'd been to one other rehab prior, and I wrote about that. I just took notes on it, but I knew going back there, I know it's the kind of place that you can't make this kind of stuff up. And, just the insanity and the humor and just the craziness that goes on there. And I'm like, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity is to get well and to chronicle it and tell people like what it's really like.
So what was, right, I was just going to say, what were the most surprising things that you found in your experience of being in rehab, and how long were you in the rehab?
I was only there for 14 days. One of the most surprising thing I think was that I realized that I was really not so unhealthy after all. When you start comparing yourself, but you shouldn't compare, or they say compare and despair, but well, that's when you're comparing yourself negatively to other people. But I think I was surprised. I was like, okay, if I just clear up, like I'm not doing so horribly in life. I just have to like get it together and stay sober. And also what really upset me and surprised me was how many, everyone there was mostly much younger than I was. And what was interesting or sad was how many of them didn't even want to be there and didn't plan on staying sober. And a bunch of them had already been to treatment many, many times. And I was just like kind of surprised that people would actually, and some of them were forced there by family members or court appointed. I was just surprised that people would actually stay there that long and spend all that time and then just say, I'm going to go back out and drink or do drugs again. Yeah.
Right. Did you see any, of those people who were sort of mandated to do it, was there any drug of choice that you saw more than others, or was it?
I'll tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't marijuana. And when I told people that's what I was there for, they were like, what else? They didn't take me all that seriously. But I'm like, well, we're still ended up in the same place. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people, just drank a lot. People mixed. I mean, like cocaine, meth, pills. It's kind of everything. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like one thing. So, right. But see, for the people there and the ones who sort of thought you didn't necessarily have to be there because it was marijuana that you were talking about, why do you think, you personally, that people don't know how addicting or how addictive marijuana can be? I think that marijuana is very insidious. And I think part of the issue is that terrible events and terrible things don't really happen to people that smoke pot, and a lot of people smoke pot casually, and some people smoke pot all day. And I think it's kind of quote unquote manageable. Like, you're not going to crash a car. You're not going to probably lose your job. Something crazy like that can happen when you're drunk or when you're on harder drugs. It just doesn't really happen. And it's really hard to reach a quote unquote bottom with marijuana because of that. So you can go on and on for years with basically just, maintaining this high every day, but nothing really progresses. So it's kind of like this slow, insidious, I called it the slow boat to nowhere. And I think people think because nothing's really happening, there's not disastrous.
There's a little line in the book that says, Gaslow was a 24-hour defunct addict living without purpose and barely able to function. And while she was aware that pot wouldn't kill her,
Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry, we got disconnected. So
Yeah.
did I drop out?
No, I hear you. No,
That's
it's
okay.
like it couldn't kill
So-
me, but I knew it wouldn't kill me, but I couldn't feel more dead inside. And that's what's the most important thing. So I think that people get away with smoking pot because nothing major happens, but you really just lose yourself and you don't, nothing. It's a lot of nothing that happens and it's a lot of waste of time.
Yeah. And how did that time go for you? So it was 2 years, and it was like, did it feel long or did it feel short?
I think it felt like forever. And it was day after day of literally the same exact nothing. And that's when I just started to get so depressed and, really hate myself because I was just like literally wasting my time, like wasting my life, like existing. I was doing nothing and I couldn't function. And it was just sad to take years of your life where you could be like productive, creative, happy. I couldn't even though I like tried to work out, it felt like I had 100-pound weight on my back. It was all just very negative.
So how are you doing now, post rehab, and time has passed and all of that? So how is your life now?
Now I'm doing great now. I'm sober 2.5 years. It'll be 3 years in June, I think. And it's just a different perspective, a different way to think, and not, how I treat myself and not be so hard on myself and, not doing whatever I can each day to make myself feel good and having a healthier life. And, I live in Miami and I'm outside a lot and I exercise a lot and, I try to connect with sober people and just like feel good stuff.
So are you working a program, like specifically, do you go to meetings? Is it like that, or is it just your own thing?
I go to some meetings. I don't go to as many as I used to. And also because of COVID, that was, another issue. Right. But yes, I do go to meetings and I have a sponsor and I have sober friends, but I've also had sober friends for 26 years almost. So a lot of them, I'm still connected with.
Right. There's so much addiction issues because of the pandemic, or so many people relapsing, or so many people accelerating their use because of what we all sort of went through. Was the pandemic, was there any struggle for you? Because 2.5 years, considering you've really had 16 years sober, so 2.5 is not that long. Was there any struggle for you during the pandemic to stay sober?
No, not at all. I'm definitely more of an introvert and I like kind of being alone. At the beginning, it was not fun because I was very, very alone, but it never crossed my mind that I should get high or anything like that. It was not an option at all. And I did do, Zoom meetings during lockdown and stuff like that. But no, it was not. That was not an issue for me.
Right on. I just know that I've had so many people reach out to me saying it was an issue, it is an issue, or that they're worried about someone in their life. And I think that for so many people, if you didn't get into the online stuff, because some people are just not tech savvy, you know what I mean? Where some people don't want to do Zoom.
Yeah,
whatever,
I personally don't like it.
It's great that you have that option.
Yeah, it's hard to focus for me. But I did at the beginning because I literally had nothing else to do and nowhere to go. Yeah.
Right. So are you doing, I was watching some of your work and I was watching some of your stand-up. Are you doing stand-up at all anywhere? Or what are you doing in the way of your career?
No,
right
I don't do stand-up. I haven't done it since before the pandemic, but I did enjoy it at the time, but it's very, very nerve-wracking. And I started writing more and I'd rather it's so much anxiety I find it's just so much anxiety the entire day to stand up on a stage for 7 minutes at 9:00 at night. It's just it's not worth it to me. And, if there was some awesome opportunity, yeah, I would do it. And it's when it's fun, it's like a really high or a really low. Like when people laugh, it's great. And when they don't, it's terrible. And It's just, like I don't want to revolve my life around that. It's too much up and down and anxiety for me. I don't want to do it anymore.
Especially because you can write.
Well, that's the thing.
So in a way, you're still doing
it.
And
when you're writing, when you're doing stand-up, like everything has to have like a punch, and everything has to be, not everything, but almost everything has to be really funny, or else you lose the audience. And when you're writing, it's different. And yeah, I can do that by myself, and I can make changes and edit it, and it's not live, and I'm not standing in front of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot imagine. Stand-up seems to me to be the most scary thing that you can do, because you're literally on a tightrope with no net. Like, it's going to be great, it's going to be awful. I guess will determines on the audience, right?
It's amazing and terrible at the same time. Like trembling before you walk out there. It's I don't know. It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. So tell us, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell my listeners where they can find you.
They can find me in Miami Beach. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. My book is called Don't Bring Your Vibrator to Rehab. It is available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere that books are sold online. And my website is pamgaslow.com, GASLOW.
Well, thank you. I learned so much, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Pam.